Hello, I am Ruby Falconer. Today's date is June 15th, 2020, and this is an astrological update from the perspective of Shamanic Egyptian Astrology. So, we are moving into a very interesting couple of weeks. There are going to be some shifts and changes, and there's also going to be a definite type of energy that we're all going to be feeling. So, the first thing that's going to happen happens this week. Depends on where you live in the United States, but Mercury will be turning retrograde, and it will be either, if you live on the West Coast, it'll be on the 17th. If you live where I live in the East Coast, it'll be on the 18th. And for those of you who live in other parts of the world, you can kind of figure that out from there. So Mercury is the planet of communication. It's how we express ourselves, how we articulate information, how we think, how we process information. It also has to do with our reality construct, what we believe reality to be. On a collective perspective, Mercury rules communication systems and also transportation systems. And it also has to do with collective societal ideals. So, that's how Mercury operates both on an individual and a collective level. It turns retrograde about 3 times a year for about 3 weeks at a time. And this time it's turning retrograde this week, and it will be turning direct on July 12th. So it's about 3 weeks, and it will be for this entire time in the sign Cancer, which is a water sign and has to do with emotions and feelings. When Mercury is in Cancer, we can expect that things are generally more emotional, that communications are emotional, that people feel their communications very deeply, that they feel things within themselves more deeply, and they're more inclined for their communications with other people to be emotionally based. And so, that can include compassion, empathy. It can also include a tendency to take things personally, to be defensive, all of that, depending on whether we're coming from a more conscious expression of Mercury in Cancer or a more unconscious expression of Mercury in Cancer. So that's going on. So that's a shift that's going to be happening this week. And whenever Mercury's retrograde, we can expect that outward communications are going to become more difficult. We're all designed in some way to be going on a kind of a collective and personal retreat during Mercury retrograde periods, which of course is not that easy to do given in the societies that we live in these days. But we can all take advantage of this by going inward within ourselves into introspection, connecting with our inner guidance. It's a wonderful time to receive downloads and information about what's our next right step, what it is that we want to release in terms of thought processes that we've been carrying with us, or thought ideas that we've been carrying with us, particularly over the last 3 months or so, 4 months or so, and opening up what we want to shift and change in terms of the way our minds operate and our thinking processes, what we want to take with us into the next phase. So that's going to be happening. That shift is happening this week. Now, toward the end of the week, we're going to have on the 20th, we have the solstice. And I have stopped referring to the solstices as either the winter solstice or the summer solstice because it obviously depends on where you live. I live in the northern hemisphere, and so for me, this is going to be the summer solstice. For my friends who live in the southern hemisphere, this is your winter solstice. And it does represent an extreme. And for those of us who live in the northern hemisphere, it represents the time where we are on Earth is closest to the sun. We're tilted toward the sun. For those who live in the southern hemisphere, you're tilted away from the sun. So for us, it's our longest day. For you, it's your shortest day. But really, it's a solstice. It's this place of an extreme. And it doesn't matter whether it's the longest day or the longest night, it's still an extreme. And although there are certain ceremonies and there are certain things that are appropriate for the summer solstice or the winter solstice, if we're thinking in terms of one planet, which is my preference. I prefer to think in terms of it, us living on Earth. We're all Earthlings. This is a solstice, and we're all experiencing this duality of either the longest day or the longest night. And if we step back off of Earth, we see the whole picture. It's only when we're thinking locally that we see only part of the picture. And there's nothing wrong with thinking locally. You know, I'm very much in favor of being aware of what we need to do in a local, in our local, support our local merchants, support our local businesses, buy locally, all of those sorts of things. However, when it comes to planetary events, I prefer to think in terms of one planet. So I don't say the summer solstice or the winter solstice. We got a solstice coming up. And it happens that this particular solstice is accompanied by a solar eclipse, and it's a full eclipse. It's an annular eclipse. And the thing about an annular eclipse is you can see a ring of fire, at the height of the eclipse. The bulk of the sun is blocked out, but you see a corona, a ring of fire around the sun. And this eclipse will not be visible in the United States. It will be visible on the other side of the world. For us, it's going to be happening in the middle of the night. It actually happens on either the 20th or the 21st, depending on where you live in the United States. But it is close to the actual solstice itself, so that makes it important. The second thing about it is that it is the second of 3 eclipses. And I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, that we are in the portal in between the worlds. So we had a lunar eclipse. It was a partial lunar eclipse on June 5th. We're now going to have, at the end of this week, on Saturday or Sunday, depending on where you live, a full solar eclipse, an annular eclipse. And then we will have another partial lunar eclipse on July 4th or the 5th, again, depending on where you live. So this time from June 5th to July 5th represents a kind of a portal, and I've been talking about this. And it's very important to think in terms of what you are shedding as you move through the portal. This particular period represents the ending of a phase of experience that began back in January. So if we go from mid-January to June 5th, we have a certain phase of experience. And very obviously, this was dominated by the coronavirus. And then as we move toward the end, we have the upsurge of protests that have to do with the Black Lives Matter issues and with systemic racism, police brutality. And systemic racism is more than just police brutality, it's systemic racism and how that's so built into our culture. So we have this energy coming up at the end, and as we move in the portal, we're still very much in that energy, but something is changing, something is shifting. And so for all of us as individuals, it's important to move through this portal consciously. I also sometimes call it a tunnel. It's like a birth canal. We're moving from one phase of experience to another. And this particular phase of experience, which begins on July 5th, will extend all the way to the end of the year, to the middle of December of 2020. And will bring the great shift energy phase, the transformation that has to do with the conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. It will bring it to an end. So we're kind of halfway through this process of transformation that has to do with the great shift. And we are approaching this week the midpoint of this transition between the worlds, this transition through the portal itself. So it's very important to bring some consciousness to this. What are you shedding? What do you want to release? What do you want not to take with you as you move into the next phase of experience? And we're in the middle of some things that are going to start to also come into play towards the end of this week, because next week we have Neptune changing direction. That will take place on the 22nd and 23rd. And so as we come to the end of the week, even we're starting to feel it now, Neptune is going to be slowing down to station. Neptune's going to be turning retrograde in Pisces next week. And then we have Venus, which has been retrograde for the last 5 weeks. Venus actually turned retrograde on May 12th. Yep, just needed to check that, May 12th. And so, Venus is going to be turning direct. Venus is in Gemini. And so there's going to be a period of time here of about a week that we're going to have both Mercury and Venus retrograde along with Neptune stationary. And so all of these are kind of underworld energies. Add to that, we're in the portal between the worlds. We're getting a lot of underworld kind of energy. So we're in this underworld sort of phase. And so I just want to take just a moment to just talk about this a little bit because, a lot of people don't like the dark. And even though some people really like the dark, they like it more than the light, just depending on kind of how we are, societally, it's kind of built into our DNA to have some fear around the darkness. That makes sense. In primitive times, you could get eaten by something, if you were out after dark. There were no electric lights. Humans would, at nighttime, they would gather around a fire, and that fire would give them that light. That would give them a sense of safety in the dark. And you didn't want to wander off into the dark because you might die. And so even though some of us might be comfortable with the dark, they might feel kind of safe with it, might feel a little bit of a thrill being in the dark, it's not programmed into us. We're programmed to prefer the light. And of course, there's really not that much difference between the dark and the light. My colleague, my friend, my co-creator of Shamanic Egyptian Astrology, Linda Starwolf, she has a saying, the dark, the light, no difference. And to me, this saying is like a Zen koan. It's worthy of meditation. What does that mean? The dark, the light, no difference. No difference. Not that there's one or the other, they are the same. And obviously, they're not the same. If we're in daylight, we're in daylight. We're in the darkness, we're in the dark. And when we think about the winter and the summer solstice, they're very different experiences. For those of you who are in the southern hemisphere who are going to your winter solstice, you have different celebrations, you have different experiences. It's cold for most of you. When I see pictures of you, you're in your parkas and you've got your hats on because where you are, it's cold. Where I am, in my neck of the woods, we're heading towards summer. We're starting to wear light clothing, and to, not wear as much because we have long days and we have heat. Well, you have cold. So obviously the light and the dark are different. They're two ends of a spectrum. They're a polarity. However, if we do what I was talking about earlier, if we step back up off of planet Earth and look at them both, we see that they are part of a cycle. And it is in the cycle where we see that there is no difference. That it's only where you are in the cycle that you perceive a difference. In reality, they are part of one thing. And that is why when we say the dark, the light, no difference, as Starwolf presents to her students, we're beginning to perceive, not just mentally, but from a body felt sense, what it is to live on one planet and what it is to have that experience even of stepping off the planet and looking at it and seeing that eternal cycle of dark and light as they each follow each other. It has to do with life and death. Death follows life, right? We all are headed toward death in some way. So at the end of our life, we will die. But life follows death. Out of every death comes a rebirth. And that this cycle really teaches us this. It particularly teaches us this when we really spend time sinking into the solstices and really feeling what they are about. We re-emerge and we head toward the opposite. As soon as the summer solstice happens, we in the northern hemisphere will start heading towards the dark. And as soon as the winter solstice happens, those of you who live in the southern hemisphere, you're going to start heading toward the light. So, it's that eternal dance of duality, which is really one thing. It's really not opposites at all. So, that for me is part of the mystery of this koan. And it's part of the energy that's happening right now. And collectively, with all of these things changing direction with this week that we're going to have from about June 17th through the 25th, we're going to have both Mercury and Neptune retrograde, and also with, both Mercury and Venus retrograde, and then also Neptune changing direction. Neptune in Shamanic Egyptian astrology is Nephthys. We did a journey with her last week. She is the keeper of the mysteries behind the veils, right? So she takes us behind the veils. So we're going to have some opportunity here. We'll be in the midpoint of the portal between the two periods of experience, to really go inward and go into the darkness, to go into our own personal internal darkness, to do some inner exploration, to receive some downloads, to receive some mysteries, to let go of some stuff that we don't want to take with us as we're moving through this portal, this tunnel, from one phase of experience to another. So all, everywhere, it doesn't matter what hemisphere you live in, we're all going to have the opportunity to explore this and to feel this. Now, in the external world, for those who don't understand what's going on, this energy might feel somewhat threatening. So there might be more happening in society and in the world in terms of people coming from a place of fear and coming from a place of anger because they are afraid. And it's frequently what happens. People are afraid, and so they come from a place of anger. They become angry. And so we might have more of that energy taking place in the next couple of weeks as we're moving through this energy, particularly in the next week. So just wanted to give you a heads up for all of that. And for our journey today, I would like to introduce you to Khonsu. Khonsu's name is spelled Khonsu. And in the Egyptian pantheon, Khonsu is the moon. And so, of course, in many traditions, the moon holds feminine or yin energy. But in the Egyptian tradition, Khonsu holds masculine or yang energy. And that's not the only time the Egyptians do that. They do that as well with earth and sky, which we'll talk more about that next week with Newt and Geb, with the movement of the sun into Cancer, which happens with the solstice on the 20th or the 21st, depending on where you live in the United States. We're going to move into the sign Cancer. And what happens in the Egyptian pantheon there is the sky is Nut, the sky goddess, who wraps herself over the sky, and her fingers and her toes touch the two horizons. And Geb is the earth god. And these two are madly in love. Nut is reaching down towards Geb, and Geb is reaching up towards her. And together they create the safe container that all of us are held in. So these two are going to be coming into prominence over the next few weeks. So what's happening right now with this portal is I would like to take you all on a journey with Khonsu, who is the moon, which is the ruler of the sign Cancer. He's often portrayed in ancient Egypt as a man with a dark circle, a moon, a full moon, a dark moon on his shoulders. And to the Egyptians, Khonsu was a healer god. The Egyptians believed that he consumed the demons that cause dis-ease. And this could be any sort of dis-ease. This could be physical illness. This could be psychological or emotional illness. It could be energetic illness. Didn't matter what it was, societal illness. Khonsu consumed the demons. And so what would happen in ancient Egypt was individuals who had someone in their family, or if they were suffering from some sort of dis-ease themselves, they would take an offering of food to Khonsu. And so they would feed him. This food symbolically would represent the dis-ease. And they would offer it to him as an offering so that he could consume the food and therefore relieve that individual of their dis-ease. So we're going to go on a journey with Khonsu and see what it is that you would like to give to him. What do you want to release? We're in this portal. We're in the tunnel. We're in the birth canal. What do you want to release? What don't you want to take with you as you move forward? What do you want to be burnt off by the full moon solar eclipse? In this annular eclipse, the moon will be very visible with that corona of fire around it. That's Khonsu, up against the sun. So what do you want to give to Khonsu, and what would you like to release? So I would like to invite everyone to take a couple of nice deep breaths. And another. Let go of distractions. Allow yourself to come present, dropping down into your body. And I want you to imagine that you are out under a dark night sky. A new moon is the dark moon. To shamanic peoples, the new moon was when you could not see the moon at all. For them, the new moon began when you could see the crescent of the moon. So there is a window of about 3 days on either side of the exact new moon that's considered the dark moon, 3 nights, when you can let go, you can release, go into introspection, go deeply within yourself, and surrender that which you no longer want to hold on to. So I want you to imagine that you are standing outside in the dark moon. You cannot see the moon, but you can see the stars. There are so many stars during the dark moon. And imagine that you are standing somewhere where you have an absolutely clear view of the sky. And find yourself a place to sit, perhaps reclining backwards, looking up at that beautiful star-studded sky. And you become aware that you have been joined by a being. This energy form, this being who has come to you in this place is Khonsu. And Khonsu has come to you as a healer. He is coming to ask you what it is that you want to give to him. What do you want him to consume? What do you want him to take from you? To take into his body, his darkness, his form, and relieve you of it so that you no longer carry it. So I'm going to be quiet now for a couple of minutes and allow you to journey with Khonsu, to be in conversation with him, to share with him what it is that you want to release, and to receive from him his healing energy. Nice deep breath. Allow yourself to move into the night in communion with the healer god Khonsu, Khonsu the moon. You are joined now by Isis, Queen Mother of Heaven, who wraps her rainbow wings around you and invites you to lie back against her. Isis is with us through every process of transformation and change that we go through. She is with us as we move through this darkness, this tunnel between the worlds, this time of darkness, of energies turning in on themselves. She is with us. Lie back in her arms and receive comfort from her and healing. Take a nice deep breath and come back into the room. If you would like to anchor this experience with a ritual, make up a plate, a small plate of food, something that you like. It doesn't have to be a lot. And on one of the nights of the dark moon, which would be the 19th, the 20th, or the 21st, put it outside. Put it against a tree, put it somewhere outside. Put it on a windowsill. It doesn't really matter. And as you do that, do a little internal ceremony, a little ritual. You are making an offering to Khonsu, the dark moon, asking him to take from you those pieces of dis-ease that you have identified, that you want to shed, you want to release during this journey, during the portal, through the portal between the worlds. And you're asking for his help. You're asking him to take this from you. And it's perfectly okay if some wild animal eats the food. It doesn't matter. It's fine. Just if you put something out with plastic or something, just make sure you go and get it so you bring it back in. But this is a way of offering. And this is what the ancient Egyptians did. They would go to a statue of Khonsu and they would leave offerings of food, asking him to consume the demons that cause their disease. So, whatever it is that you don't want to take with you, that you know you're shedding, give it to Khonsu. He will consume it for you. So thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking with you again.